Hello, welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm joined by Birmingham Live's Joe Chapman for our preview show. Newcastle head down to West Brom on Sunday in what is a must-win for both teams, Joe. Obviously, West Brom coming in this game on the back of a defeat to Everton. What is the mood like in the camp and how are they approaching this game on Sunday?
The mood's been really, really positive. To be honest with you, the last few weeks have seen a really big upturn in performance levels. I think that it's taken a little while for Allardyce to get his feet under the table at Albion. They really, really needed some January additions. They didn't arrive until the very, very end of the window. So a little bit of an integration period with those new players. And, kind of from the middle of February onwards up until last night, the collective performances have been much, much better. And the results have been there as well. They should have won more than the one game that they've picked up. But one defeat in four, and they've only conceded a couple of goals in that time. So defensively, they're looking a lot stronger as well. It's just a big question now of, is it too late, really? In terms of pushing for survival, because time is very, very quickly running out. But they do look a lot better, and at least they're going to, seemingly, they're going to give it a go between now and the end of the season, rather than go out with a whimper.
I didn't watch the game last night. I'm sure our listeners and viewers might understand. I was more focused on another game down in London. But I did listen to a bit of on the radio, and it seemed in the first half West Brom started really well and arguably should have been in front at some points during the first half.
Yeah, that's been another problem really in the last few weeks. It's just killing teams off. They were the better team against Man United. They should have won that game. They had to settle for a draw with 10 men for an hour against Burnley a week later. They took the game to Burnley, and again, they should have been out of sight really in the second half. They're putting so much into their performances. I think that they really need to start rewarding themselves. That's kind of something that really, really struck me. Even the goal they scored against Brighton the other last Saturday, which, of course, we all know. Anybody watching that game will have known all about the kind of controversy in that game. They were fortunate that day, but even the goal they scored that day was a set piece. So, you're creating chances. You need your strikers to start putting them away. That's something that's been a consistent problem, really. And again, it was the same last night. They've started really, really positive. Everton looked leggy. Everton obviously played on Monday night and looked pretty weary at the beginning of that game. And I think Albion just kind of almost caught them off guard a little bit, the way they took to the game. And the longer the game goes on and you're not got yourself in front, then inevitably, a team like Everton, where they are in the league table, are going to nick a goal, and ultimately they've had to pay the price.
So can Newcastle United fans expect West Brom to come flying out the traps then? And is that what they're going to have to deal with early on Sunday?
Well, I think my concern really is the way Everton were at the beginning of last night's game is what Albion might be a little bit like on Sunday. It's such a quick turnaround. It's something like 60 hours in between the two games. So that's something they're going to have to really deal with, because I think Allardyce has now found a team where he can rely on them to kind of put in these performances and to, be that disciplined side that he's been searching for the entirety of his reign. So he's now kind of relying on those players to deliver the same. It's not like, we're a relative Man City, for example, where you can just kind of switch up 3 or 4 players. There are kind of a pool of 12, 13 outfield players that he needs to kind of depend on. So it's a case of can they repeat those or rather replicate those energy levels again, because they know that while Everton was a game that was kind of crowbarred into their schedule, that they didn't really want, that they would have rather have played later on in the season, this is their focus. This is the game they had to go and win, this Newcastle game. And I'm sure it's the same with you guys as well. You going into this game knowing, with all the problems at Newcastle at the moment, not even just off the field, but I would look at the injury list at the moment, you think, God, talk about kind of like when you looks down, it's really, really, really hits you kind of with both barrels.
The cards that Newcastle have been dealt recently with injuries is devastating. And I was going to actually say that in previous games, Newcastle have started quite well. In the first half as well against Manchester United, they were the better side. They were better side for about 50 minutes, really. And again, against Wolves, first half, they were decent against Southampton. They were decent in that first half as well. But then I remember the injuries, and basically you know, the way they've started well, it's always been built around the likes of Almiron and St. Maximin, and again going back further when Wilson was fit. So it is certainly going to be interesting to see how they line up on Sunday, whether there's a formation change. And as you mentioned there, playing in the background, well, not even the background, playing right at the forefront of all of this is training ground. Brushed up with Matt Ritchie, which Steve Bruce in a press conference today, you know, said, yeah, it happened, but it happens all up and down the country, clubs everywhere. It's not that big of a deal. I know Big Sam was asked about it in his press conference after the Everton game. What did he have to say about it?
He was pretty honest about it. I think what you probably expect Big Sam to be like about it, really. Kind of, you know, it's two grown men that have had a disagreement and will just basically kind of, you know, air your views and as you should do, and then move on the next day. I think he thinks from the outside looking in that it's been blown out of proportion a little bit. So it's a situation I think Albion have got to try and use to their advantage, because that is the one thing that they seem to have at the moment, is that unity. They all do seem to be pulling in the same direction at the moment. They all do seem to understand what is being expected of them. What Allardyce is demanding that perhaps Bilic wasn't, you know, the questions that Allardyce is asking of them on a day-to-day basis in terms of team shape and you know, all the kind of basics that you associate with an Allardyce, Bruce, Tony Pulis like kind of manager. So I don't think you'd have too many players at West Brom kind of calling it out at the moment, because it does seem to be, you know, it is in every situation in football. I think when the results start to come, then everything clicks into place at the same time. You've got the confidence levels up, but also the players know then that what they're buying into is going to produce some results, which I suppose is the problem at the minute with Newcastle. Is a bit, you know, the longer this run goes on without these results, players start questioning what on earth's going on at the management level.
It's a bit of a nightmare. I mean, they've only won 2 Premier League games since that game against West Brom back in December when Gayle came off the bench. I mean, they were lucky there to pick up all 3 points as well. And I think at that point in time, the results weren't mirroring the performances. They were picking up points which maybe they didn't really deserve to win. Whereas since that game, they've picked up points where they deserve to, i.e. against Southampton, against Everton. They're the games they've won. But elsewhere, they know the results have been exactly how really they should be given the performances. Is this a game that West Brom are targeting? And do you think West Brom are favourites coming into this one?
Without doubt, they're targeting. I mean, Allardyce has pretty much said it himself that it's game over if they don't win this game. Really, you know, it's a bit of a 12-pointer, isn't it? Because if they win this game, West Brom, then they're 6 points, within 6 points of Newcastle. And then all of a sudden, there's then, 9-10 games to go. And all of a sudden, that 6-point gap, should that be the case come Sunday afternoon, looks really, you know, you can claw that back. It's looking realistic that they could get there. And the confidence levels that would go with another win. So on the flip side of that, if you lose the game to Newcastle or even a draw, really, I know a point's not very much used to Newcastle because I know Fulham keep digging in, and I know they were pretty unlucky last night. A draw would be the worst result for both sides, I imagine, but defeat, I think, would be the end for Albion, kind of plain and simple. Like Sheffield United, I think a lot of people would have just written them off automatically, but I think that would be the end if they were to get beaten by Newcastle on Sunday. So it's a must-win, yes, certainly. Are Albion favourites? I had a quick look at the bookies' odds, and the bookies seem to think that Albion are very narrow favourites. So I think it's much for muchness at the minute. Really, I think it gets cancelled out by not so much the defeat last night, but definitely what that performance would have taken out of them in terms of their prep for the game. That's the one thing that Allardyce has had a bit of a gripe about, is that Bruce and Newcastle have had a full week to prepare for this game when they're actually on the training pitch.
Yeah, full week to prepare, but it's not as rosy as Big Sam might think. We've got the quotes here that he was asked if it was a must-win, Big Sam, after the Everton game. And he said, if we beat Newcastle, we're only 6 points away from them. If we lose, we're 12 points away. That would make it as big as a task as anyone has achieved to try and stay in the Premier League with the amount of games that are left. It can be done mathematically, but it would make life extremely difficult. That's how big this one is. So clearly, he's targeting 3 points. And I think for many Newcastle United fans, actually watching the Fulham game last night, if we could be inside the living rooms of Newcastle United fans, we would have seen them cheering every time Lloris caught the ball, or the ball went out of the bar, or what have you. And it's a sad sign of the times when Newcastle United fans are having to cheer on Spurs to beat Fulham. And I honestly don't think there's much confidence from Newcastle United fans going into this game on Sunday. On the flip side, if you take away all the chaos and all the drama, it's still in Newcastle United's hands. They're still 3 points ahead of Fulham. If they beat West Brom, it goes to 6. Fulham have got to then face Liverpool. So for all the drama that's going on, this is still in Newcastle's hands. And, it's just whether they can seize the opportunity. They haven't of late, and I can understand totally, because I'm in the same boat, why there's a massive lack of confidence that Newcastle can kind of achieve safety without relying on other sides. How will West Brom take advantage then of Newcastle missing their 3-star men?
I mean, those players, you involve those players, going back to the reverse fixture, we all know Almiron's impact very, very well in that game. Newcastle may as well have kicked that game off 1-0 up. It was ridiculous. Wilson was the one that I really, really took out of it. I've seen Newcastle a number of times this season on the telly and whatnot. That was the one time I've been able to watch them in the flesh. And Wilson really, really struck me. We all know about his goal record. We all know about the Wilson to Newcastle goals ratio and how important that is, and what they're going to be missing from him being injured. But it was his all-round game. I think that sometimes actually probably goes under the radar in that his hold-up play, the way he gets them up the pitch. He does a job, which I'd probably say better than the way Shane Long used to for West Brom. He'd be good for a double-figure goal tally, but it's more than what he can bring to the whole side, and the way he could get Maximan and Almiron and Ryan Fraser and that kind of player into the game. And he's obviously got that turn of pace as well. I think that's a huge miss, really, because I think, look at West Brom's defenders, whether it's O'Shea, who played really well last night and has played well since he came to the side. Shemi Ajayi's back from suspension, so Allardyce has got a decision to make there. Cole Botley is a constant in the side at the moment. So whichever kind of combination he goes with in defence, I think they probably have the measure of a Carroll or a Joe Linton, in terms of a physical presence. I don't think they mind an aerial battle, and it would be more kind of a pacey striker with the ball at his feet on the floor hurt them. And so Wilson not playing is a big boost to Albion. And
you mentioned the pacey striker, and it is a guy that you guys know very well. Wanted to re-sign him after that glorious championship season, and it is Dwight Gayle. And for many people, he should be the man starting on Sunday, as long as he's played in the position in which he's natural to, because it's a big frustration to me that he started against Chelsea out in this wide position, which Callum Wilson has made his own. That suits Callum Wilson perfectly well, because he can hold up the ball, he's strong, he can then come inside. Dwight Gayle is not that sort of striker. He needs to be in the centre, balls over the top, balls, into the channels, which, again, West Brom fans will know all about. And hopefully he starts on Sunday, and he starts in the best position for him, and he's hungry as well, because he'll be going back to the Baggies, point to prove there perhaps, and also he needs a new deal in the summer as well. So if he's wanting to show himself, there's no better stage to do it right now when Newcastle are missing their main striker and Callum Wilson. It's time for Dwight Gayle to step up and earn his stripes, so to speak.
Yeah, and we saw it in the reverse game as well. There was an air of inevitability when he came off the bench that he was going to have an impact, and the goal he scored was a terrific goal, broke Albion hearts, but it was a brilliant header. So he's still got that real proper razor sharp touch in front of goal. It's interesting, actually. He was deployed a little bit wide to accommodate Jay Rodriguez once or twice when he was at West Brom, because first half of that season, it sounds silly now, they're all Premier League players, but Albion had a front three of Rodriguez, Gayle and Harvey Barnes, and to have those front three, you had the two playing off Rodriguez, who's obviously more of a target man. It was a frustration, actually, with Albion fans and for a lot of that time when Darren Moore was in charge, that Gayle needs to be playing number 9. If he could play as a number 9, and he still scored 25 goals, he was still top scorer. But you kind of wondered to yourself, God, imagine how many he would have scored if he'd been played as like the absolute main man. So, I mean, it's an interesting one in the summer, actually, with Gayle. Do you imagine you'll get another contract? Will it depend on the league that Newcastle are in? Because I think a lot of Albion fans would probably take a gamble on him on a free transfer if he became available.
I think it depends on what he wants as well, because it is probably going to be his last contract, especially his last big contract. He's 31, and he's only played something like, I think it's 127 minutes this season or something like that. He hasn't really featured since that game against West Brom, which he scored the winner. I think he's only started one, to my knowledge, which would have been Chelsea, come off the bench a couple of times. I think he's had 6 unused substitute appearances. So, I think it depends on what he wants. It depends on what Newcastle can offer him in terms of a wage. He took a massive wage boost that summer that he joined West Brom. That was the kind of the movement Newcastle did to make sure he went to West Brom and Rondon came to St James's Park. And it's all about, like I said, just the opportunities that Newcastle can give him. Because if Callum Wilson's fit, he's not going to replace him. So the Newcastle then go 2 up top. Unlikely given Almiron and St Maximin. So I think there's loads of little elements that play into it. And also, I mean, the Newcastle want to keep him. 31, his injuries keep popping up, and he seems to score a couple of goals and that momentum goes. So we saw that towards the end of last season. He went on a good run, picked up an injury, and then that momentum stopped. So I think it's the both parties just got to sit down and kind of discuss what they can offer each other. But if Newcastle aren't going to buy a striker in the summer, many people thought they should have bought one this January to cover Callum Wilson, and then obviously the inevitable happened that Callum Wilson got injured. If they aren't going to splash the cash on a decent, bit of competition for Wilson, then it probably would make sense to offer him a 1-2 year contract, because if he's fit, he's more than a capable replacement for Wilson. He's a decent backup alternative. So yeah, fitness, wage, all that all plays into one, but hopefully he can prove himself on Sunday. In terms of West Brom's weaknesses then, Joe, what should Newcastle United be looking out for?
Speaking to one of your colleagues earlier about weaknesses, I think it didn't really matter how poor Newcastle were playing a few weeks ago. As recently as a few weeks ago, that have fancied themselves to score a hatful against Albion. You look at the goals that Albion have conceded at the Hawthorns this season, it's absolutely crazy, really. Palace scored 5, Arsenal scored 4, Leeds scored 5, City scored 5, Villa scored 3, Leicester scored 3. The amount of times that they've basically given themselves no hope in each game. The game's gone after kind of 20 minutes, half an hour when they're 2-3 behind. They've really properly stamped that out in the last few weeks. And as I said earlier, they've conceded a couple of goals in 4 games. One of those was a stunner of a goal from Bruno Fernandes. So they've really, really stepped it up defensively. Set pieces are something that I think, generally speaking, they've been okay with, but they were undone last night by Everton. Sigurdsson's delivery really, really, we all know about his ability, and he caused some problems there, and Richarlison kind of just nicked him between a couple of defenders and headed home. So, I think it's a concentration level, really, for me. There's been a lot of individual errors this season for Albion. A lot of the time, it's not even really of the opposition's doing. They've kind of handed goals to them, very much like the Almiron goal in the first game, where Ivanovic doesn't judge the ball, and all of a sudden Wilson's in, passes to Almiron. The position in the defence is all over the place, and he's got a pretty easy task. They do seem to, now that Allardyce is there, now that Allardyce is getting them on the training pitch 4 or 5 times a week and demanding exactly what he wants. They know exactly what he wants. And you can just see these shoots of improvement, certainly, optimism a little bit, yeah. He's wanting clean sheets as a kind of just as a given from now on, really. He knows that Albion are the team that are going to score 3 and 4 goals each game. So it is a case of just from the off, keeping it tight. It sounds really, really obvious, but it's getting back to basics that they needed to do for a long, long time because of all the goals they've conceded. So if they can, as they did yesterday for the first hour, keep it tight. It's all about what they can do at the other end, really, because defensively they've turned a bit of a corner. So I suppose the question back to you would be, how do Newcastle kind of combat that defence? How do they go about breaking it down? How do they deal with those front three? How do you think the front three or front four will line up? Because you've got Carroll, Gayle, Joe Linton, Fraser, Ritchie. I mean, how do you kind of line them up? Where's Willock been playing?
Willock's been playing in the kind of middle of the park alongside Shelvey and Hayden. Hayden, incidentally, has picked up a bit of a knock, so it'll be interesting to see if he is available and fit on Sunday. I hope he is, because he really is the key to that midfield in terms of stopping the other sides, attacking. But yeah, I mean, there's an option that Willock could replace Almiron in that kind of number 10 role. Mikel Arteta has said previously that he sees Willock playing in that kind of role in the future. But there's options. I know what I would do, as I've mentioned there. I would bring Dwight Gayle in, play Dwight in the middle, Ryan Fraser on one wing, and Jacob Murphy on the other side to just get those, those balls into the box. You could play Cowell in that role as well and make sure that he gets the service. What Steve Bruce will do is another question. In recent games, he's brought Ryan Fraser off and played him in the middle, kept Joe Linton out on the right, and obviously Almiron, St. Maxim on the left, so he'll have to be replaced. But I can see him doing that and putting Fraser into the middle, which in my opinion is a total waste because his skills are, he crosses the ball. He's got the most crosses this season, and he's barely played. And to have him in the middle is utterly bizarre in my opinion. But I can see that. I think that's probably what will happen unless they've decided to change the formation, because obviously if you put Gayle or you put Cowell in the centre, then the kind of dynamic of the game changes, and it is getting the ball down the wide and putting it into the box rather than getting the ball down the wide and the players moving in with the ball, which is what St. Maximin does, what Wilson did. So it does change the whole dynamic, and Steve Bruce has spoken recently, seems a bit reluctant to change it. He was asked about last week and he kind of said, well, you can't keep changing things. And there has been signs of improvement. That being said, with Almiron, with Wilson, with St. Maximin, they've still only won 2 games in 15, or you could say 2 and 11, given when Wilson got injured. So, that formation isn't one in which success, is guaranteed. But I do think you'll end up playing with Fraser in the middle, which I think would be a massive waste, unfortunately. But I'm not the manager. In terms of the best player then for West Brom, who have they Newcastle got to look out for? Pereira's one a name that stands out. But is he? I don't know. From what I see, sometimes he can be a bit hit and miss, a bit inconsistent.
Yeah, in terms of positioning, actually, it's quite interesting to make that point about Fraser. Pereira is somebody that has been a little bit of a victim in the way that Albion have set up recently, because we all know that he's a number 10. That's where he plays his best football. That's where Bilic strived for most of the time to play him. But ultimately, you've got to think of the team and Albion in order to bring in Yakuslu, who's been an absolute revelation as a holding midfielder, and Maitland-Niles, who's been very, very good as well. And with Conor Gallagher, who's got that energy, you need to have those wide positions filled. And I mean, Pereira at the moment, he's kind of playing for his position in the starting 11, really, because he hasn't been at it at all, really, the last couple of games. And he had a little period where he came out of the team when Allardyce very, very quickly made it clear that nobody's undroppable. You will get dropped if you're not performing. And he did so over Christmas, came back in the side, a proper little purple patch of goals. But they've dried up again now. So Pereira's really got to stand out. He's really got to start influencing games again. I know that the wide of a front three isn't his favourite position, but that's what he's got to play, because you look at the players: Dean Garner, Snodgrass, Callum Robinson, Colin Grant. They're all after a starting spot, and they're all kind of vying for the same position effectively. So Pereira, you kind of hope will turn a corner at any given moment. Deanne's been a real proper handful for. I mean, he threw Victor Lindelof and Harry Maguire around the other week. Real serious physical prowess. And imagine, I don't know whether Federico Fernandez will be back, but I know Lascelles, and they'll have to be properly on their game because he is kind of, somebody that can really rough defenders up.
Fernandez hopefully will be back. He's been in training. They felt last week would come too soon for him, and it did. He didn't feature, so I think he should be back this weekend, and it'll be a huge boost in there. But again, the likes of Keegan Clark and Jamal Lascelles haven't exactly, been performing poorly. But I think Fernandez for many is the best defender they've got. I guess then the final question, Joe, is what will the score be? Now, Big Sam's record against Newcastle is very, very good. Newcastle have only won 2 out of 12 since he left the job back in, goodness me, what was it, 2008, January 2008. So that is a lifetime ago. And
he's managed about 6 or 7 clubs since then, hasn't he?
Yeah, he likes to, he knows how to get about, does Sam Allardyce. But brilliant record against Newcastle. Again, stats, records are there to be broken, though, I guess. And it all comes down to maybe who wants it more on Sunday. Will West Brom want it more? What will the score be?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a particularly pretty game. I think I can see it being quite cagey, certainly early on. Neither team's going to want to give anything away in the opening exchanges. I've got to just, certainly head on heart, I've got to hope that Albion can get through this game and still have a glimmer of hope on the other side. So I think it'll be a pretty scrappy affair, but I'm going to back Albion to win 1-0. Whether that'll be enough in the grand scheme of things, I still don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what Newcastle's running is like. Albion's is still quite questionable. They've blown their chances to beat Fulham and Sheffield United and Burnley recently. So, it feels like they're still they might have a bit of a regret at the end of this season. But all they can do is win the next game, I suppose. It's a bit of a managerial cliche, but I do think they'll probably edge it. They're not going to blow teams away, but 1-0 is what I'm saying. What about yourself?
Yeah, I do fear a West Brom win. To be fair, I said Newcastle get beat off Wolves, and they didn't. So, but I just think with all the drama and everything that's gone on this week, the injuries was bad enough, but then the training ground burst up, and as we speak, there's been a takeover update within the High Court. So, all these things, it's arguably Newcastle's biggest game for many, many years, probably going back to maybe that West Ham game back under John Carver when Pereira scored a last-minute winner to save promotion that the season, and then obviously got relegated the season after. But yeah, it's a massive game. There's just so many distractions that it can't be good for Steve Bruce, for the players. Certainly not good for the fans. And I just fear it was bad enough with these injuries. With all this that's going on, I think it'll just all add up to a West Brom win.
Do you think that having the fans in the ground would benefit them right now, knowing what's gone on, or do you reckon actually them playing behind closed doors is a bit of a blessing in disguise at the moment?
I think if the fans had been in with this run, it's hard to say whether Steve Bruce would still be in a job at most other clubs, given the run he's on. He wouldn't still be in a job. I mean, how many other teams allow their manager to go on? They hadn't won 10, 11 games, and they've only won 2 in 15. Spent a lot of money in the summer. Yes, you've had COVID. Yes, you've had injuries and what have you. But at the end of the day, it's a results-driven business, and somehow, Steve Bruce has managed to cling on to his job despite a horrible run of, results. And I think his position would have been untenable had the fans been in the ground. Of course, the other side of that is whether the fans being in the ground would have kind of changed the course of the season, and the support of the 12th man, the cliche there, whether they would have gone such a bad run in the first place. I suppose we'll never know. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be back in this season or until the final game this season, maybe. So Steve Bruce has got to soldier on and hopefully pick up 3 points on Sunday. But I just can't see it. And if he does lose, it really is unthinkable to think that he will lose. I know I've just thought it, so I've just contradicted myself. But lose is just something that Newcastle cannot afford to do, because the Rock's got to stop. I know they drew 1-1 with Wolves, but they were fortunate. 5 more minutes, they probably would have lost that game. And they need to win and I would like to see them do it comfortably. However, where that's going to come, I'm doubtful it's going to come on Sunday. Hopefully, from a Newcastle point of view anyway, I'm proved wrong.
Are you home? Are you at home on the last game of the season?
No, we're away to Fulham, which I know the TV companies are already rubbing their hands with that, because every game I've watched so far over the last weeks likes to mention it about 4 or 5 times during the broadcast. So yes, BT Sky were well aware of the drama that could unfold on the last day of the season, but hopefully Newcastle are done and dusted by then and they're safe. Because as our chief sports writer said earlier this week, I don't think anyone would be backing them to win that game if they needed to. But fingers crossed they win it on Sunday, and we don't need. Well, Newcastle didn't even talk about that anyway.
Yeah, speak for yourself.
But Joe, we appreciate you joining us on the podcast, and well, enjoy your weekends, and hopefully Newcastle can pick up a result and doesn't sour your Sunday too badly.
Yeah, pleasure, mate. See you on the other side.